One thing I've really never understood is Christians mocking other Christians for their relationship with God. Like, I can completely understand atheists and unbelievers mocking us and making fun of us for claiming to hear God, which we do hear from God. But it's whenever a Christian mocks another Christian for it, it doesn't make any sense to me. Because, like, we read the same Bible, we worship the same God. Like, we read a book that it's a story written about people hearing from God and obeying God and listening to God. So how are you going to point and make fun of another believer for saying they heard God? Like, I see posts going around on the internet all the time of Christians just going like, oh, God didn't tell you to say that. God didn't tell you to start that business. God didn't tell you to start that clothing line, da 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 yada this. God didn't speak to you through a vision. Oh, that wasn't God. But like, yes, it was. And who are you to say that wasn't God? Like, make it make sense. Like, people put God in this little box, and that's not the case. It's the God of the universe. It's the God who created everything, literally like spoke, and things were formed from his words. Like, do we not read the same Bible? Like, make it make sense. And people just really just don't understand God's personality. Like, when people say these types of things, it shows me that they don't ever open up their Bible to read. Because I was reading in the book of Ezekiel just now. In Ezekiel chapter 5, verse 12, God tells Ezekiel to bake his barley cakes over human poop. Yes, he tells Ezekiel to use human poop to cook his barley cakes. And he says, make sure the people of Israel are watching you when you do this. Now, that sounds completely crazy, but God told him to do that, and he had to obey God. And imagine if Ezekiel, before he did that, he told people what God told him to do. Like, oh yeah, today I'm going to cook my food over human poop. Everybody around him's going to call him crazy and be like, God did not tell you to do that, but God did tell him to do that. One person's set of instructions may be completely different from the set of instructions that you hear from God, but it doesn't invalidate what they heard, which is why it's so important to sometimes just stay quiet whenever it comes to obeying God and following his instructions, because not everybody is going to, cheer for you whenever God tells you to do something and you obey him, because sometimes your instructions are crazy, like cook poop or cook your cake over poop, like cook your food with human poop. Like, sometimes God is going to tell you to do something crazy and it's going to look absolutely crazy to everybody, but you got to obey God. Like, it's so important to seek after God's approval and not man's approval. Like, you got to obey God even if your instructions are crazy. And just because God told somebody to do something that he has never told you to do before, it doesn't mean God didn't say it. And we just got to stop putting God in a box. And sometimes people's relationship with God is like restricted. Like, they're not able to see as much because they don't believe as much. Like, I remember I used to speak to this woman of God. I used to listen to this woman of God who used to tell me God spoke to her through numbers, and she said like she would be like 333 111, and I'm immediately thinking like, oh, that sounds like angel numbers. That sounds like New Age. That's not Christianity. But I opened up my mind and I was like, okay, she's not New Age. She's a Christian, so obviously, she's not, that's not what she's working with. And I opened up my mind and I was able to hear God speak to me through numbers after that, because I stopped putting a restriction on it. I was like, oh my goodness, God can speak to you through numbers. Like, you can't put God in a box. He created numbers. He created everything. He can speak to you through everything, and God's instructions for everybody's life is going to be different. I don't know if my words are making sense. I hope so. But yeah, it's so important to just seek God's approval and not man's approval. And whenever God gives you instructions over your life, you don't always have to tell somebody about it. Sometimes it's just easy to follow God in silence, because the people around you are going to say all sorts of types of things sometimes, So God told you to cook your cake over poop. Don't tell nobody about what God told you, okay? Just listen to God in silence, okay? Because people are going to call you crazy, okay?